Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So we have been talking about pure substances. In the previous class, we looked at the use of steam tables. So let me just tell you that the steam tables are not just limited to giving the properties of water, but for several other fluids. So look at the steam tables more closely, all these tables that I've given you. Any of these can be used for calculations. I would assume that you are going to have these tables with you at all times. Including the quiz today, you would be needing these tables. So if you have not downloaded it, please download it. You can even take a print and have it ready with you. Whatever way you are more convenient, it is more convenient for you. So sometimes taking a print may be easier because then flipping becomes easier. If you have to quickly go from one table to the other, it is much more convenient with the handout that way. So ideal gas law is compressibility factor is what we will be looking at in today's class. So the first slide is essentially a recap of what we have done. First two slides maybe. So we know that ideal gas law is PV is equal to nRT, where R or R bar is what has been used here because we are going to use a slightly different R. So R here stands for universal gas constant, which has a value of 8.314 joules per mole Kelvin. And if you go with the basic definition that number of moles of a gas is mass of the gas divided by the molecular mass, and then you absorb the capital M with R bar and define a new R, which is just R, which is R bar by M, and you absorb the small m in V. So then you are going to essentially eliminate this n altogether, and you are going to get PV is equal to RT. And now V has become small v, and R has become from R bar to just R. R bar was universal gas constant. Now we have gone back to essentially the specific gas constant. And we know that the ideal gas law works for low density gases, but how low is low has not really been defined for us. So we would like to answer in this lecture how low the pressure should be in order for this ideal gas law to apply. And we would also like to know how much deviation do we expect to get from ideal gas law. So if the deviation is not much, let us say within 5%, then we can say that the ideal gas law applies. Otherwise, we will have to do some more realistic, you will have to use a more realistic equation of state. So as you know, ideal gas law is also known as the equation of state, and ideal gas law is very convenient to use. But towards the end, and whenever ideal gas law fails, then maybe we will have to substitute the ideal gas law with a more complex equation of state, and we will see several such equations of state towards the end of this class. So basically the question that we are asking is, what parameter range does the ideal gas law apply? So what we will do now is to define a parameter which is going to evaluate, which is going to quantify how much of the deviation from the ideal gas law is happening. So we are going to define a parameter which is the compressibility factor, which is essentially PV upon RT. So you can see that what we have done is we could have taken left hand side minus the right hand side as a parameter. Here we have decided to take the left hand side divided by the right hand side as a parameter. So ideally it should be 1. And now we are going to compute the actual value of this z, and we are going to say whether z is less than 1 or greater than 1. And that is going to, if z is not equal to unity, then we know that the ideal gas law is not working. But as we said, maybe we can have a tolerance band and say that if I assume that within 5%, it is the values are okay. So that means I will look for value of Z between 0.95 and 1.05. So if Z value lies within this range, I will still assume that the ideal gas law works. And by the way, this 5% is just an arbitrary thing. We have set it, but we should preset it. We cannot just change it and say that, oh, now I like 5%. If it is more than 5%, I like 7%. And so, I mean, we should not do that. We should have a preset limit and say that, okay, within this limit, if things are falling, I would assume that my law, although it has become approximate, it is now still okay to apply it and go ahead. Now, one of the basic assumptions that we make in the ideal gas law is that there are no intermolecular forces. But of course, we know in real gases, these intermolecular forces are present. And if the intermolecular forces are repulsive, so then the gas molecules will tend to move further away from each other because of these repulsive forces, and we would expect the value of Z to be greater than 1. So coming back to the basic equation of Z is equal to PV upon RT, you can see that you can also divide it by PV upon RT, and PV by RT is now the ideal corresponding to ideal conditions, because PV upon RT for ideal condition is 1. So I can always divide this equation by PV upon RT, where now V is the one which is coming from the ideal gas law. Okay, so you can see then in that case, for a given pressure and temperature, essentially, the P and T, and of course R is just a constant, all these will cancel out, and you will be left with V upon V. Okay, so V is now the actual volume divided by the ideal gas volume. So you can think of, so what we are sort of thinking of is the volume that we are getting in the ideal gas law divided by the actual volume. I should have written this equation, I'm realizing this now. So we could have written it as V actual divided by V ideal gas law. Okay, and if V actual volume has become more than the ideal gas law, then of course Z becomes greater than 1, and this corresponds to repulsive forces between the molecules. On the other hand, if the intermolecular forces are attractive, then the actual volume that I would get with respect to the ideal gas volume, which is predicted by the ideal gas law, is going to be less, and therefore my Z will have a value which is less than 1. So you can see that looking at the value of Z, I can start saying something about the intermolecular forces that a real gas is undergoing. And therefore it turns out to be a useful parameter to look at. And that's what we are going to do now, is we are going to look at how does the compressibility factor vary as a function of pressure and temperature. So as we know from the previous lectures that pressure, we can change from liquid to vapor phases. So these two are important parameters, and we are in this chart, which is a compressibility factor chart, which is specifically plotted for nitrogen. I am seeing that there are different curves corresponding to what is the value of pressure and temperature that we see. So to very quickly look at what is plotted here, there is blue curve which corresponds to temperature of 100 Kelvin at different pressures. So on my horizontal axis, I have pressure. On my vertical axis, I have compressibility factor. And the blue curve corresponds to the compressibility factor at a temperature of 100 Kelvin. If you were to increase the temperature to 160 Kelvin, then you get this green curve. And then at a further larger temperature of 400 Kelvin, you have this red curve. And black dotted lines are also shown to show this is the value of 1, which is coming from the ideal gas law. So these are the 4 curves that we are plotting here. Now, if you start looking at more closely, you can see that the blue curve, the behavior of these 3 curves are substantially different from each other. The blue curve has a value of 0.8 something, and then it is almost a vertical line, and then it is becoming close to 0 and at this particular pressure, and then otherwise as you increase the pressure now, the compressibility factor is increasing. So what do you think is going on for this blue curve? Why do we get all these values from all the way from 0.8 to all the way to less than 0.1? Any guesses here?
Sir, it liquefies.
Yes, that's right. So it liquefies, then what happens? The volume to the volume. Is
The
it
volume
increasing?
decreases drastically, so Z
Yeah,
decreases
the volume.
drastically.
Correct. And as we have said, the compressibility factor is the actual volume to the ideal gas law volume. So you can see that my pressure and temperature are not changing. So the value, the answer that I'm going to get from the ideal gas law is going to remain the same, but my actual volume is actually reducing. And actual volume is reducing, as you said, that it is because the gas is liquefying, and in the process of liquefaction, the volume reduces. Okay, so the compressibility factor, because it's a ratio of actual to the ideal, it is reducing now. And of course, with an increase, so here you can see that you have to look at again the PT, and whether, so here you will find that you are out of it, you will see what state you are in, and here for the as you increase the pressure, you will see that in fact you will have a curve where you will actually put this region, saturated region, etc., and you will see exactly where this blue curve corresponds to. Now, for the other case, let me not talk about the green one right now. Let us go to the red curve. You can see that the red curve is close to the compressibility factor for this entire range of pressure values that we see. Okay, so you can see that even for a pressure of something from 0, which is very close to vacuum, to 300 bars, the compressibility factor has hardly changed by 20%. So it starts off with 1 and it has not even reached 1.2. It is almost like 1.1516. So it's almost only increased by 16% over this huge range of increase in pressure. The other feature that we see is that all these curves, irrespective of what is happening, all these curves, although we are going to see they are exhibiting very different behavior, are starting from unity. So, which is consistent with what we think that ideal gas law applies at low pressures. So, the pressure at low value of pressure, you expect all these curves to start at 1, and which is what you are seeing. By the way, this is based on real data for nitrogen, and of course, compressibility factor has been defined based on the equation that we have given earlier. So these are some of the general features that we see, and because we are going to see 3 different figures of compressibility factor, and with 3 different views, so I have given them as figure numbers. So this is figure number 1, and because we cannot project all of them together, so just try to remember these, what was shown. So in figure 1, what we are seeing that all curves originate from unity at low pressure, which means that the ideal gas behavior applies at low pressures. But we see a strong dependence on temperature. We saw that for 100 Kelvin in figure 1, nitrogen is in a gaseous state, which with an increase in, which we saw that liquefies, whereas with an increase in pressure, okay, the gas molecules are now close together. So that means that there is an attractive force between the molecules at this stage, and the molecules tends to come closer still. So we are essentially we're based on the attractive and repulsive molecules. We are trying to explain this curve, the blue curve, and we are essentially saying that there is an attractive force between the molecules for these conditions for 100 Kelvin temperature, and the molecules tends to come close to each other. Now, as we increase, so basically we are saying that there is an attractive force between the molecules, and because of this, so the molecules are packed close together, and the attractive force is trying to bring them closer still, and therefore the value of Z that we will see actually reduces. But this attractive force, the tendency for the molecules to attract, reduces with an increase in temperature. And this becomes further clear when we look at this figure of, again, nitrogen. So here you will see that it's a different range of pressure that we are looking at. So earlier the range was from 0 to 300 bars. Here we are only plotting all the way to 50 bars. And compressibility factor, we see that all values are lying less than 1. So we have reduced the axis of compressibility factor here from 0 to 1. Here, although now we are seeing a several more curves, which corresponds to different temperatures from 90 Kelvin to 140 Kelvin. So, and now you can see the saturated region, which is marked much more clearly now. So earlier what you were seeing is this 100 Kelvin curve and 140 Kelvin. I think these were the two values that you were seeing earlier. So now you can see that the 100 Kelvin curve is essentially corresponds to a large part in the phase change region. And then here it is lying in essentially it will become supercritical in this region here. So these are the regions that we are seeing now. So because the critical point is here and the pressure and temperature are more than the critical values here now. So, and of course 130, 140, these are all in the supercritical. Beyond this pressure values, they are in the supercritical region, otherwise in the vapor region. So and of course you can see that all these curves are again starting from unity, just like we have said that at low pressures the compressibility factor is 1. Okay, but of course otherwise you can see that there is a substantial deviation of the compressibility factor in this region. For example, at 140 Kelvin, at 40 bar pressure, you can see that the compressibility factor that I would get would be something like 0.6, something like 0.6 and 0.7. So it's like the deviating by 30 to 40%, which is a large deviation. And therefore, you cannot expect to apply the ideal gas law for these conditions.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, can you please explain what phase transformations were taking place in the last slide and why the blue line was increasing at high pressures?
Basically, so that's a good question. So basically, we were trying to see where are the various phases lying here. So you can see that the vapor phase is on the top, the saturated region is here, and the liquid is in this part here. Now in the liquid, you see that if I change my pressure and temperature, okay, it's the volume is not a very strong function of this. The density is almost a constant. So you can see that my actual volume that I would have in my liquid region is not going to be very different. Okay, so ideal gas law will give me certain volume, assuming that I do not know what. So I have just blindly used my ideal gas law. So I have gotten one value of a specific volume from my ideal gas law, whereas my actual volume that I'm getting, as I'm saying in the liquid region, is not a strong function of pressure and temperature. Therefore, all these curves tend to essentially lie on each other. So this is what is happening in the liquid region. So my compressibility value essentially takes more or less the same value. So this is my liquid region. But once I start moving towards a critical point, so this is my critical point here. So this is my critical point. And then beyond this critical point, of course, I get into the supercritical region. So all these are essentially my supercritical region. Okay, and of course, sometimes we define that both my pressure and temperature, if you remember the video, and if you remember the PT diagram, so we said that when we are on the right and on the top of the supercritical point, then we will call that as my supercritical region. So you can see that essentially this is my pressure value over which is more than the critical pressure. And of course, my critical temperature is, you can see, somewhere between 120 and 130 Kelvin. We have seen at the critical point, the isotherms exhibit an inflection point. Okay, so if you will take some value which is essentially corresponding to something like 126 Kelvin for nitrogen, you will see that it will exhibit, because it is passing through the critical point, it will exhibit an inflection point. Okay, so it will be something like this here, which is not shown. So beyond this temperature and beyond this pressure, the gas is now in the supercritical state. And of course, below that, you can say it's loosely, you can say it's liquid and it is vapor. Okay, so I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir.
The critical thing is that there is vapor here and there is liquid on this, and this is my critical point.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, the vertical lines that we are seeing for 90 Kelvin, 100 Kelvin, so we are maintaining the pressure as constant and also the temperature is constant. So, like, how is the volume change happening? Because we have fixed, like, the vertical lines are at a single pressure and they
Yeah.
are at a given temperature also.
Yeah. So what is my compressibility factor? Let me ask you this question because I have said it so many times that
It is
so
the ratio of the PV upon RT.
correct. And the other way that we said you can look at it is,
The volume of the gas upon the volume of the ideal
yes, that's
fluid.
right. Yes. So now which volume are you talking about is not changing? The
Okay,
ideal
so the
gas law
ideal gas volume is not changing.
volume is
Okay.
not changing because I have fixed my PV. I mean P and T, and of course R is fixed. Okay,
Right.
and of course the ratio is 1, or PV is equal to RT. So P is, as you have said very correctly, that pressure is not changing, my temperature is not changing, R is a constant. So my V cannot change. So my ideal gas volume is specific volume. Of course, here when we are saying V, it is actually specific volume. So my ideal gas volume is not, or the volume that I calculate from my ideal gas law cannot change. But my actual volume is changing because, as you also said, that my compressibility factor is actual volume to the volume which I obtain from my ideal gas law.
Yes, sir.
My ideal gas law volume is not changing, but my actual volume is reducing because of the liquefaction. Okay, and as we said, this is my volume, blue curve. This is my volume for my vapor. This is my volume for my liquid. Okay, so you can remember that this is my Vg here, and this is my Vf here. Okay, and of course Vf is smaller than my Vg, and of course this transition is happening, and my actual volume is reducing.
Yes, sir.
That answer your question?
Yes, sir.
So remember, for steam table now you can see the importance of that, and as we said, that just like steam table, you would have tables for other substances as well, and several of them are already there in the tables that we have given you. So although I keep calling it as steam tables, you can call it as tables. Okay, so not just restricted to water. You can see that it is actually having properties for several other substances as well. Okay,
Sir,
so yes, please.
sir, in the blue region where the compressibility factor is reducing, we said that the actual volume is reducing. So, does it reduce gradually that it acquires all the points which are there on the vertical blue part?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So let me open this to the class and see what does the class answer want to answer. So while you think, let me go to the previous presentation. I think I need that now. So remember this plot now, TV. Okay, so I have given you a hint now. Now somebody wants to give an answer.
During the phase change, pressure and temperature remains the same and only the quality changes.
Correct. And we have said here, how did we describe this TV? So we are essentially looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this curve, the blue curve. okay, which has been given on this TV axis here, TV diagram here. How did we say that we are getting this? We are essentially getting it through this process here. So we're taking liquid, water, of course, water instead of water, we are talking about nitrogen in this case. Okay, and we're adding heat, slowly adding heat, and my volume is increasing. Okay, so it's now going from 2 to 4, 2, 3, 4. And now you can see the same thing which is happening here in this compressibility chart now. So what is the answer now?
Sir,
So
but
it
in
is
the
actually,
earlier diagram, we were varying a parameter, right? Where volume. So we were varying the volume, and we saw that over a varying volume, the temperature remained constant. But here we are not varying any parameter, right? We are saying pressure and temperature are constants.
so you are essentially, so just think of, so those who are getting confused here, just think of this picture here that I am projecting right now. Okay, everything is coming from this experiment. Okay, so whatever charge that we are talking about, okay, so let me again remind you that we have seen all these, we had seen charts like these. We had seen charts like TS diagram, we had looked at pH diagram, we had looked at HS diagram, and so on. So how are we doing this process? So I think it's a very good question that you have raised here, and hope this will clarify for everybody. Okay, so we are essentially, this is my experiment. Okay, the experiment that I'm showing you here. Okay, from this experiment, this is my actual process that I'm following. Now, from here, I am measuring various properties. Okay, whether it is V, it is T, it is pressure, it is enthalpy, entropy. Of course, enthalpy, entropy may not be directly measurable. So, but we somehow have the values of the enthalpy, entropy, and so on. Okay, so you can assume that this is the process that I'm following, this is the experiment I'm doing, and from this experiment, I'm getting the value of these properties. Okay, and then all I'm doing is plotting them. Okay, so when you come to this compressibility factor also, okay, so you can see that essentially I am adding heat. In the process of adding heat, I am changing, or rather I'm removing heat in this case because I'm moving from vapor to liquid. So then I am plotting how does my volume change, and so that is how I'm tracing this curve here. Okay, and at every point when I'm doing this process, I'm assuming that I'm in quasi-equilibrium process. Okay, that was one another answer that was given, which is also right. Okay, so this process is being followed slowly, which is removal of heat in this case. And in the process, I get various values of specific volume, and I'm plotting that. And based on that, I'm computing my compressibility factor and I'm plotting that. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
So this is essentially what we had described earlier. So I think we have discussed quite a bit. So these are all simple points that you can read. Now, let me show you the third figure here, which is now zoomed in the vertical axis. Now you can see that I'm only plotting from 0.8 to 1.2, and the temperatures that we are plotting are much higher. So the earlier temperatures that we were looking at was close to the liquefaction point. And now we are looking at the other extreme where we are substantially above the liquefaction point. And how do we know that? We know that because we have said that the critical temperature for nitrogen is 126.2 Kelvin. So all these temperatures that you see are almost double of the critical temperature, or the temperature at the critical point. So what you see very interestingly here is that at these higher temperatures, again over a large range of pressure values, the compressibility factor is close to unity. Okay, so of course it is not exactly 1, but it is quite close to 1. Especially, for example, if you look at 273 Kelvin, this is like 0 degrees Celsius, you see that it is over 0 to 150 bars of pressure, the compressibility factor, and you can read here, this is 0.98. It's in steps of 0.02, so it is 0.98. So it only deviates from unity by 2%. Okay, over this large range of pressure, and even if you go even higher, you are deviating by almost like not more, I mean, like 10-12%. Okay, so you can see that at 0 degrees Celsius, if you take nitrogen, okay, which is essentially like a composition of air, and if you go to a colder country, even so, you will see that it is behaving like an ideal gas, is what the point is here is. So, and of course, this applies even to room temperature. So, room temperature, the ideal gas law applies even to 100 bars pressure. Of course, please remember that we are limited to 100 to nitrogen. We are not saying it for all gases. Okay. Now, at very high pressures, the intermolecular distance becomes very small. And of course, if the intermolecular force becomes very small, you start getting repulsive forces. And that helps to explain why you expect to get compressibility factors becoming greater than 1 at larger pressures. And of course, the repulsive forces are not so strongly dependent on temperature, and therefore you would see a reduced influence of the temperature at higher pressures. Okay, so I hope that you have gotten a sense of what we are talking about here by now. And the questions that you people asked were very, very good. And those help to clarify a lot of points. So I hope the class is clear.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, at some point, for these curves, the compressibility factor is decreasing with pressure till some point, and then it starts increasing.
Yeah.
So, how can we determine that point, and what is the reason for this? That it decreases till some point and then increases afterwards. It is because that the repulsive forces become dominant. Because in that region z is not greater than 1, so we can say that attractive forces are dominant, but the curve just changes the slope. Why?
Yeah. So again, that's a very good question. So the question that is being asked is, how do I determine? So if this blue curve, we are seeing that it decreases first and then it increases. So how do we know that why should it decrease? Why should it increase? Can we predict this point or this minima in this curve? So that's a question that is being asked. And then if you want to really answer that question, one has to do a detailed modeling of these molecules. Okay, so here, just to give you one sense, so how do we model these molecules? If you remember your physics, at least high school physics, I mean, at least we were taught, I don't know whether it is now still there in JE syllabus. We remember your Lennard-Jones potential. Okay. So Lennard-Jones potential essentially had 1 upon r to the power of 6 term and 1 upon r to the power of 12 term. Okay. I don't know if you remember, if you had that material still covered. Is it there or not?
No, sir, I can't remember anything.
Okay, so essentially the intermolecular forces, so let me just tell you, so the intermolecular forces are essentially given as A upon r to the power of 6 minus B upon r to the power of 12.
Yeah, sir, this was covered.
This was covered. So now you can see that it depends on, I mean, of course, this is just a model again, but you can remember that now you can see that it's a very strong nonlinear dependence. It's like r to the power of 6 and r to the power of 12. Okay, so you can see that you have to, and of course it depends on the values of A and B that you choose. I mean, that is there for those molecules. One, of course, this is still in the classical regime. You have to maybe put in some quantum mechanical effect because you're talking about those scales. So, I mean, it becomes quite complex if you want to really model it and really want to explain why the curves are going this. So, people have been able to reproduce it as far as I understand using these models. But again, the explanation is not that straightforward. Here, we are trying to simplify, maybe we are trying to oversimplify, and we are just trying to say that we are to look at repulsive forces and attractive forces between the molecules. And based on that, we can at least get a sense of whether we expect compressibility factors to be less than unity or compressibility factors to be greater than unity. Okay, so that's all we are doing, and we are sort of leaving it there. Okay, so we are not really getting into more details than this. So sorry to have disappointed you, but at least that gives you some sense of, I mean, just gives you some sense. That's all we are going to leave it at.
So, but can we say that when the slope becomes positive for the curve, for the isotherm, for a particular isotherm, the repulsive forces are dominant?
Okay, so let me jump here. In that case, I will come to this in a minute. So this is the equation, general equation that you see. Okay, so using this equation, okay, you can sort of describe them, but this is only being described. So of course, because you have an equation, you can differentiate and so on. You can see where the minima would lie. Okay, so if you are really interested, you can do something like this. Okay, but how do I get this? Is let me come to that. Any other questions? How to get this minima? As we said that maybe we can. I mean, from this equation that we will get to, we can try to differentiate, etc., and get to this minima. But if you want to really explain why this is happening, then as we said that we need more sophisticated models.
Okay, sir.
Other than that, any other question? So the next question that arises now, this is an interesting point, and I have seen a lot of people get fascinated by this idea. So the idea is that we said that this is a chart for nitrogen. Now, if you want to plot for CO2 or any other gas, methane, for example, how will the charts look like? So you'll see that the charts, interestingly, if you look at the charts, you will see that qualitatively they look very similar. All these values would change. The 220 Kelvin, whatever you see, would change to a different temperature. Pressure would change to a different value. But the thing is that there is some commonality still between the various charts. And that leads us to this interesting idea that can we define things in a different axis? Can you use different set of non-dimensional parameters, not different set of parameters? And now I'm going to introduce the idea of non-dimensional parameters. And this non-dimensional parameters you will see is something a very, very useful concept when you go to fluid mechanics course. So essentially, it means that can you non-dimensionalize things with respect to some other parameter and make all these various charts that you have for various gases fall on a single curve, on single chart. So what we means, let me show you the answer first. So what it means that can we draw a chart like this? So you can say that this is my chart which is applicable to all gases. Okay. So that's like our dream. That's like what we would like to get. One chart which describes all gases. Okay. So this is a chart which does that. But the thing is that it is no longer the pressure and temperature as the parameter here, or the pressure on this horizontal axis. It is actually something else, which is the reduced pressure and the reduced temperature. Now, what are these? So what we are saying now is that if you take pressure at the actual value of pressure and divide it by another pressure. Okay. Now, what is this value of pressure? This is not just any arbitrary value of pressure. It is the pressure which is corresponding to the critical value. And we know that for critical value is for nitrogen, it has a certain value, 134 bar pressure and 126.2 bar, sorry, 126.2 as the Kelvin as the temperature. So this is, as we know from our previous charts, a critical point is a point. It has, for a given gas, it is going to have a certain value of pressure and temperature and specific volume. So if I go with these values, if I divide my actual pressure by the pressure at the critical point, temperature at the critical point, and so on, then, and if I use these as my axis now, what I find is that these curves for various gases tend to fall on each other. Okay, the variability between these. So this curve that I've shown here, so essentially what that means is that using this curve, which is at TR as 1.5 and a pressure of 3.5, reduced pressure of 3.5. So that means that it will correspond to nitrogen, which was 34 bar. So 34 into 3.5 bar pressure, and a temperature which is 126 Kelvin multiplied by 1.5 Kelvin. This is the value of compressibility factor that I would get, which is 0.8. Okay. So this is the idea is that to take charts for different gases and try to have a single chart. And it turns out that by using these critical values of pressure and temperature, we are able to reduce these various charts for various gases onto a single chart. Okay, so that's the point that we are making. And because this applies, we call that as the law of corresponding states, which means that if two or more substances have the same reduced pressure and the reduced temperature, then they have the same reduced volume. Although this law is not strictly a law, it gives you a decent sense of what is the specific volume that you expect to get, reduced volume that you expect to get. Okay, is this idea clear? Yes.
So the different curves that were there, so they are for all gases. Those curves can be used at
Yeah, that's
different
exactly what I'm
temperatures.
saying. Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So if you plot various gases, okay, or various substances, okay, you will see that by going to these axes, which are PR and TR now, okay, you will have the same specific volume as we said, and therefore the same compressibility factor. Okay, so therefore, yeah, so all these gases are now reducing to this curve now. Okay, so this is now, it is very interesting that you have now one master equation is what you can write. Okay, so this is now my master equation. Okay, for different values of PR and TR, you can get the value of Z. Okay, and of course from here, you can get to the questions that we had asked earlier. When can we use the ideal gas law? And we said for the ideal gas law, you need to get Z as close to unity. And you see that Z becomes close to unity here, which is at reduced pressure very low pressures. And also where you can see this curve, TR as 2. And to remind you, we are essentially looking at this curve here. All these curves are very close to unity. Okay, within 5% or 10% over this range of pressure things are lying. Okay, and this is a reasonably large range of temperature that you see from 220 Kelvin to 400 Kelvin. You can see all these curves are essentially lying close to 5%. Okay, so that means this is what we are now saying, that for temperatures which are greater than twice the critical temperature, TR is greater than 2 over a large range of pressure, okay, all the way for PR is equal to 5, you are finding that Z is equal to 1. So not just what we had been taught, that the ideal gas law applies at low pressure, that is still correct, but now we are finding another range where the ideal gas law applies, which is essentially that my TR should be greater than 2, and you will see that for all the way of PR as 5, now this covers a large range of pressures and temperatures. You can see that the ideal gas law applies. Okay, so this is the answer to the one of the questions that we had posed earlier. And of course, this law also states that the compressibility factor at the critical point for most of the gases, for most of the substances, is a constant value, which is 0.275. Okay, and now just to emphasize this point, we can essentially look at the compressibility factor for various substances from our table. And you can go to the first table here, where the compressibility factor for various substances are actually plotted. So you can read numbers. The last column is what I'm reading. These are acetylene, air, ammonia, argon, etc. These are the substances that we are looking at. and you look at the compressibility factor which has actually been measured, and you can see that for all of them, they are actually pretty close to 0.275. Okay, of course, you see some deviation for waters to 333. You also see values of 0.304. But other than that, you can see that they are lying in a reasonably small range of compressibility factors, which is essentially, and of course, this value is coming from essentially by putting PR and TR is equal to 1 in this equation here and then solving for Z. Okay, is this clear? So I think we'll have to stop here for now and go for the quiz.